working right now in order to directing the fires onto that area right there. Bring it in.
The wind that morning was cruel. It hissed through the cemetery like a warning, rattling the rusted chains on the iron gate. A handful of strangers stood by a plain wooden box lowered into the frozen ground. No flag, no salute, no family to grieve. Only the dull thud of dirt hitting the lid broke the silence. Somewhere, a crow cried. His name, they said, wasn't important anymore. Just another soldier who never made it home in one piece. His medals, if there were any, had vanished long ago. His story swallowed by time. But here's the thing. A man doesn't fight through fire and blood without leaving something behind. Something he couldn't let the world see. Not yet. We don't know when he began writing it. Maybe in the mud of Normandy, maybe in the suffocating heat of the Pacific. What we do know is this: it stayed hidden for decades. And when it finally surfaced, it rewrote everything we thought we knew about him. Picture it: a small attic in a crumbling farmhouse. Dust thick, enough to choke you. The faint smell of oil and leather. An old footlocker, edges dented, lock rusted shut. The man who found it, a stranger, swears he almost left it behind. Just another piece of junk in a dead man's house. But something stopped him. A patch sewn into the corner of an army jacket so worn it was barely there. A patch from a unit that officially no longer existed. Inside the locker, photographs no one had ever seen. Letters with words crossed out in black ink. And at the very bottom, wrapped in oilcloth like it was worth more than gold, a diary. The pages were brittle, the ink faded, but the words burned. They spoke of missions that never made it into the history books, of orders that were never meant to be spoken aloud, of comrades whose names had been erased from every record. And then, they spoke of something else, something no soldier should have carried alone. You can almost hear the scratch of the pen, the trembling pauses between sentences, the way he'd stop, mid-thought, as if afraid the page might betray him. Was it guilt? Was it a confession? Or was it something the government didn't want us to know? The stranger turned the last page, and his hands began to shake. He knew then, this was no ordinary diary. This was a map, a key, and maybe a death sentence. What happened next would pull historians, journalists, and even military intelligence into a race against time. But before any of them could understand the full truth, they had to ask one question. Why had this man been buried without honors? And that's when the jacket was unzipped, revealing something no one could have imagined. The attic was still. Only the distant creak of the old house seemed to answer the question left hanging from the introduction. That jacket, faded olive green, smelling of dust and gun oil, was heavier than it looked. The stranger, a man named Daniel Carter, turned it over in his hands. His fingers traced the torn patch. Last time we left with that moment, the zipper, and inside, it wasn't just the diary. It was a folded, yellowed piece of paper, wedged deep in the lining, as if hidden for decades. It was a list, a short one, 4 names, written in block letters. 3 of them were crossed out. Daniel didn't recognize any of them until he read the 4th. It wasn't crossed out. The name was Samuel Briggs. Daniel's pulse quickened. He didn't know why this name mattered yet, but the way it stood alone on the page, it was, almost defiant. He flipped open the diary to the first entry. The handwriting was cramped, deliberate, the kind of script that belonged to someone taught before the war. June 14th, 1944. The orders came at night. We were told not to speak of this to anyone, ever. But a man can't bury everything. So I will leave this here, in case someone, someday, needs to know the truth. The entry stopped there. No explanation, just a faint smudge, like the writer's hand had trembled or hesitated. Daniel sat back, trying to piece it together. He knew the war had countless classified operations, missions that would never see daylight. But if this man had truly been ordered to silence for life, why write anything down at all? He reached for the second entry and froze. From somewhere downstairs, a floorboard groaned. Daniel wasn't alone. The sound came again, deliberate, slow. Someone was in the house. His hand instinctively went to his pocket, where the old paper list now rested. The attic felt smaller, the shadows darker. Then a voice from below. Low, male. "Put it back where you found it, son." Daniel's heart pounded. Whoever was down there knew exactly what he had found. And just when he thought he was about to get an explanation, a detail no one expected came to light. The voice still echoed in Daniel's mind. "Put it back where you found it, son." We left him frozen in the attic, one hand on the diary, the other clutching the list of names. Slowly, he turned toward the stairs. Figure emerged in the dim light, broad-shouldered, wearing a long brown coat that had seen better days. The man's face was mostly hidden under the brim of a weathered hat, but Daniel caught the glint of sharp eyes. "Who are you?" Daniel demanded. "That's not the question you should be asking," the stranger replied. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, the kind that comes from carrying secrets for too long. The man stepped closer. "I'm here for that paper, and for your own good. You'll hand it over now." Daniel hesitated, glancing at the diary. "You knew him, didn't you? The soldier buried without honors." A pause, then a small, almost imperceptible nod. "He saved my life," the man said quietly. "And if you read what's in that diary, you might not live long enough to regret it." Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. Why? What's so dangerous about a list of names? The man's eyes flicked to the attic window, scanning the street below. Because those aren't just names. They're the last survivors of something the government swore never happened, and someone's making sure they stay silent, permanently. Daniel's mind raced. 3 of the names were already crossed out. If the pattern was real, Samuel Briggs, the last name, was the only one left alive. The man in the coat reached into his pocket and placed something on the floor between them. A small, tarnished dog tag. Daniel picked it up. Stamped into the metal was the same unit number sewn into the old jacket. But beneath it was a single word. Erased. Daniel looked up, but the man was already backing toward the stairs. "You want answers? Find Briggs, but don't follow him after dark." Before Daniel could respond, the stranger was gone, the sound of his boots fading into the wind. Daniel turned back to the diary, flipping to the next entry. And that's when he saw it. A photograph tucked between the pages, showing all 4 men from the list, standing together. Only this time, one of them had his face scratched out. But that wasn't the end of it, not even close. The photograph lay on the attic floor, its edges curled with age. 4 men in uniform, standing shoulder to shoulder, boots caked with mud. 3 faces clear, 1 violently scratched out. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the missing face was the key to everything. But for now, his focus was on the one name that wasn't crossed out: Samuel Briggs. We left off with the stranger's warning. Find Briggs, but don't follow him after dark. Daniel didn't know whether to take it as superstition or survival advice. Either way, he decided not to waste time. Hours later, he sat in his apartment, the diary spread out on the table, the list of names beside it. His laptop glowed in the dark as he dug through military archives, veterans forums, even obituaries. It was slow work. Briggs was like a ghost. Until finally, a hit. a tiny forgotten news article from 1998. Local veteran Samuel Briggs speaks at memorial ceremony in Helena, Montana. The photo with the article showed an elderly man in a wheelchair, his chest decorated with medals, none of which matched the unit patch in Daniel's attic. The caption mentioned he was a retired mechanic living in a cabin outside town. It didn't make sense. Daniel called the local VFW hall, pretending to be a reporter. The man who answered hesitated when Daniel asked about Briggs. "Hasn't been seen in months," the voice said. "Some say he moved in with family. Others, well, some think he's just gone." Daniel pressed. "Gone how?" A pause. "Like the others." The next morning, Daniel was on a bus heading north. He carried the diary in his backpack, the list in his pocket, and a growing unease in his chest. When he finally reached Helena, the town felt watchful. As he made his way toward the address from the article, he noticed the same black sedan pass him twice. Briggs's cabin was at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by pine trees. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was home. Daniel knocked once, twice. The door creaked open just enough for him to see a single pale blue eye peering through the gap. "Samuel Briggs?" Daniel asked. The eye studied him. "Depends who's asking." Daniel held up the diary. "I think you knew the man who wrote this." The door swung wider, revealing an old man with trembling hands, holding a revolver. And that's when Briggs said the words that changed everything. "You've got no idea what you've stumbled into, son. And if they followed you here, we're both already dead." Briggs's revolver didn't waver. His pale blue eyes flicked past Daniel, scanning the trees beyond the cabin door. Only after a long, tense moment did he lower the weapon and gesture for Daniel to come inside. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and old paper. Maps covered one wall, marked with pins and faded ink lines. On the mantel sat a single black and white photograph of the four men from the attic photo, this time with all their faces intact. Briggs motioned for Daniel to sit. "I swore I'd never speak of it," he began, his voice gravelly. "But if the others are gone, maybe the truth dies unless I tell it now." He leaned forward. It was 1944, France. Officially, our unit didn't exist. Unofficially, we were tasked with finding something the Nazis had stolen, something they weren't supposed to have. Orders came from the very top. Daniel asked, "Stolen what? Gold? Art?" Briggs shook his head. "No. Worse. Something alive." Daniel blinked. "Alive?" Briggs didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled a small metal box from under the table. Inside was a strip of black film, coiled and brittle. "This," he said, "is the only surviving piece of evidence. We were ordered to destroy it. I couldn't." Daniel reached for it, but Briggs snapped the lid shut. "Not here, not now, they're watching." As if on cue, the faint rumble of an engine rolled through the pines. Briggs froze. "Did you tell anyone you were coming here?" Daniel shook his head, but doubt flickered in his mind. The black sedan from town. Briggs moved quickly, pulling open a hidden hatch in the floor. "Cellar. Now." Daniel hesitated. "Who's out there?" Briggs' voice dropped to a whisper. "Men who don't exist. Men who will do whatever it takes to erase this and us from history." The sound of the engine stopped. Then, the crunch of boots on gravel. From the window, Daniel caught sight of two figures in dark coats approaching the cabin, their faces obscured by the brim of their hats. Briggs handed Daniel the metal box. "If they get me, you run. Find the woman in the photograph." Daniel frowned. "What woman?" Briggs pointed to the mantel, and for the first time, Daniel noticed her, standing at the far left of the photo, half hidden behind the men. Before he could ask her name, the front door splintered under the force of a kick, and just like that, the past had caught up to them. The cabin erupted in chaos. The front door hung, crooked on its hinges as two men in dark coats stormed inside, their movements sharp, deliberate. No words, no hesitation, just the cold efficiency of people who had done this before. Briggs shoved Daniel toward the cellar hatch. "Go," he barked, but Daniel didn't move. He saw the revolver in Briggs's hand tremble, not from fear, but from age. Daniel grabbed a cast-iron poker from the fireplace, just as one of the intruders lunged forward. The clash was brutal and fast, the sound of bodies, hitting furniture, glass shattering, boots grinding into the wooden floor. One of the men caught sight of the diary on the table. He reached for it, and that's when Briggs fired. The gunshot cracked through the cabin, sending the man sprawling. The other ducked behind the kitchen wall, returning fire. Daniel dove for cover, heart pounding. He heard Briggs shout, "Get the box to her. She's the only one who can finish this." Bullets tore splinters from the walls. Daniel saw the mantle again. The woman's face frozen in that black and white photograph. She looked young, determined, and somehow familiar. The second man made his move, charging from the kitchen. Daniel swung the poker hard, connecting with a sickening thud. The man crumpled, motionless. Briggs was breathing heavily now, slumped in his chair. A dark stain spread across his shirt. "It's too late for me," he rasped. "But you still have a chance." Daniel knelt beside him. "Who is she?" Briggs' voice was barely a whisper. "Her name is Eleanor Hart. She was our interpreter, but she knew more than any of us. She kept the other half of the diary. Without her pages, none of it makes sense." Daniel clutched the metal box tight. "Where do I find her?" Briggs's eyes flickered with pain, and then with something else. "She's not in any phone book. You'll need to go where it all started." "France?" Daniel asked. A faint nod. "Normandy, the village of Saint-Mer." His voice broke off into a cough. "But be careful. They've been waiting for someone to come looking." The distant wail of sirens began to rise, too far to help, close enough to mean more trouble. Briggs looked at Daniel one last time. "Don't let them bury this again." And then, his hand went limp. Daniel stood alone in the wrecked cabin, holding the diary, the box, and a name, Eleanor Hart, that could unlock the final truth. But as he stepped outside, he saw something that froze him in place. The black sedan from town, idling at the end of the road. Inside, in the passenger seat, sat a woman, watching him. The woman in the black sedan was not what Daniel expected. She stepped out slowly, her gaze steady, her hair silvered with age. "You're Daniel," she said, as if she had been waiting for him. "Briggs told me you'd come." Her name was Eleanor Hart, older now, but unmistakably the woman from the photograph. She drove Daniel out of town before he could even ask questions, taking back roads until the mountains swallowed the horizon. They stopped at a small storage unit. Inside, Eleanor unlocked a weathered trunk. There, wrapped in faded linen, was the missing half of the diary. She placed it gently beside Daniel's. "I kept it hidden," she said quietly, "because what we saw could destroy reputations, governments, maybe even the idea of what we fought for." But Briggs was right. History doesn't belong to those who hide it. It belongs to those brave enough to tell it. Daniel listened as Eleanor filled in the final pieces. In 1944, their unit had been sent to retrieve a scientist, a defector carrying research the Nazis had weaponized. The mission succeeded, but at a cost. 3 men from the photo died under unofficial orders to ensure the scientist never reached the wrong hands again. The man buried without honors had taken the blame to protect the rest. Officially, he was branded a deserter. Unofficially, he had saved countless lives. His silence had been his sentence. Eleanor's voice cracked. "We promised him that one day his name would be cleared. Briggs tried, I tried, but the files stayed sealed. Until now." Daniel stared at the joined diaries, 2 halves of a story finally whole. Together, they were proof. It took months, But with Eleanor's help, the documents reached the right hands. The Pentagon reviewed the case, and for the first time in over 70 years, the soldier's record was corrected. He was awarded the Silver Star, posthumously. On the day of the ceremony, the flag draped over his casket caught the wind and snapped in the sunlight. Veterans saluted. Strangers stood in silence. Eleanor whispered his name as if releasing it into the world one last time. History had not erased him, because someone cared enough to remember. And sometimes the bravest battles are the ones fought long after the war ends. If this story moved you, there are others on our channel that deserve to be remembered. Click the next video and help us bring these forgotten heroes back to light. And don't forget to subscribe.